Well, hey, folks, I'm here with Leone King of Energy Storage Canada. Very nice to meet you, Leone.
Nice to meet you as well.
And, I'm just real transparent. This didn't work out last week because of the internet goblins or, whatever kind of monster name we want to use. We're not on our side. But you're calling in from, tell us where you're at.
So I'm calling in from Canada. I live in Ottawa, which is country's capital here in Ontario.
All right. Well, thanks for joining. I guess it's about dinner time. We're getting close there for you. Very nice to meet you. Well, Leone, tell us a little bit about Energy Storage Canada. Let's start there.
So Energy Storage Canada is the national trade association for storage in Canada. The name is really self-evident. We definitely match our label. And we are a technology and duration agnostic association that works with governments, industries, and communities across Canada to support the development of energy storage.
Fantastic. How long has, and is it ESC? Is that the
Mhm.
acronym you like to use? How long has ESC been around?
So we've been around for about, I think, 14 years now. It started provincially in Ontario and transitioned to a national organization about 8 or 9 years ago.
All right. Congrats. And I'm just staring at your website a little bit. Looks like you guys pull quite a few attendees and vendors at the trade show. So this is gathering a lot of momentum.
Yeah, our conference is the largest national energy storage conference in Canada. We host it each year in September or October. And we have somewhere in the range of 200 to 250 companies represented, a few dozen countries. It's a really big show, and we have a lot of fun putting it on every year.
I've never been. I need to go.
Definitely, definitely. We'll get you here sometime.
All right, I need to go. I haven't hit one in Canada yet. No shortage down here in the lower 48, just south of you, but that's exciting. Tell us what it's like this year for energy storage in Canada.
So this year is a really interesting year. We're seeing a lot of the procurements and the RFPs for projects that have been put out in the last 2 or 3 years, getting to the deployment phase and getting energized and actually operating on Canadian grids. And we're getting to finally see the results of all of the efforts that have gone into, creating this market for energy storage in Canada. And I think our members are also just excited to, get some of that data, see where they can, plan their next project and what the next big challenge or opportunity is for storage in Canada. Because of course they're always, as soon as this one's done, they're always looking to the next one. So it's been a really exciting year to see a lot of these projects become energized, and we are probably, I would say, a little bit behind some of the European countries and some of the US states in terms of getting those deployed. But there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of excitement about the industry in Canada that I think is going to lead to some acceleration of that development and deployment in the coming years.
Well, first of all, congrats to the entire group and the organization for helping push those projects forward. I know it can be, sometimes years and a long while to wait before you start seeing ground being broken and megawatts being placed out on the grid. So I know how hard that is. Congratulations. And what do you said more projects coming or more momentum. What's going on in Canada? Is it the demand that's driving it? Is policy changing? What's going on?
So I think Canada, it's a mix of both. There are some provinces that have really high projections for increased demand in the next 10 to 20 years in Canada. One of the standouts is probably Ontario. They're projecting somewhere between 50 and 65% increase in demand in the next 20 years. Um, and that's just not normal for Canada. Our demand has stayed relatively stable and relatively flat for, a few decades. So that's a big driver in Canada. The other driver is that there are a lot of provinces who are setting some really ambitious goals in terms of the energy transition and getting clean energy onto their grid. So between the combination of some of our larger provinces expecting really big demand increases and a lot of the provinces really diving into what a clean, modern, flexible electricity grid is going to look like for them. Energy storage is kind of central to both of those conversations in the way that the Canadian grids operate. So we're definitely seeing a lot of those as drivers.
Okay. Well, I want to circle back on the demand, but you said folks
Mm.
getting behind the energy transition. Is that citizens? Is it government policy? Where are you getting that support?
A lot of it to date has been very policy driven, very provincially driven. Canada's provinces each manage their own electricity system, so each province will set its own course and its own timeline for reaching, carbon net neutral. So a lot of it is being driven by policy, but we have, particularly in the last couple of years, seen an increase in grassroots and community organizations that are really keen to have a voice in their electricity and their energy consumption. I think part of it actually ties back to all of the increase in building projects that we're starting to see. And we haven't seen big electricity and energy infrastructure built in Canada for probably 3 or 4 decades outside of maybe Alberta. So now that we're seeing, I mean, this week we saw the North America's largest hydro project announced with federal funding. We're seeing big nuclear being built. We're seeing all these storage assets being built and getting online. I think energy is front and center for Canadians in a way that it hasn't been in last generations. And so folks are really keen to take an interest and have a voice in what kind of energy is generated in their province and what kind of assets are getting built in their communities.
I love that. And it matches perfectly, right? Demand you say is going up and policy is coming in to match to make sure that, all of us are making good decisions with what types of energy we're going to bring, how we're going to manage it. Storage is, a very nice, quick, clean, you can level, you can increase, stabilize. All of these benefits come with storage. So it makes sense. Loving the story. Tell me about more of the demand. What's are you getting more factories, business? Do you have as many of those electric cars as we do down here? They're all over. I don't know if that's it.
We do not have as many electric cars, percentage wise as the US does yet. We're definitely seeing continued slow incremental increase in the number of EVs that we have on the road. But I would say currently the primary drivers are industry. We're seeing a lot of industry development. Some of it is direct from the energy industry itself. Some of it is from other industries across the country. And the other is population growth. Canada is one of the few G7 countries that still has an increasing population. Some of it is immigration, but we do still have increasing populations, and a lot of that population increase is pretty densely populated in our larger cities, which I think is fairly normal. But that's also a driver in terms of what we're anticipating we'll see for demand is increased population.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Altair Energy Services, and their highly trained, expert technical staff, leveraging decades of renewable power management experience into customized solutions for everyone to meet their energy goals and contribute to a better future for all. Altair's team of hardworking, respected experts are providing full scope, turnkey repairs, planned and unplanned maintenance, system upgrades, fully autonomous technical crews, supplemental staffing, and customized dynamic scheduling to fit your power production needs. Contact Altair at info@altairenergyservices.com and learn more about their wide range of capabilities across multiple power technologies and platforms. Makes sense. More humans, more power needed. And you said some is immigration. Is that not the majority?
It depends on the year. And I think COVID threw everything a little bit into flux. But Canada's First Nations populations are still growing at very high rates. And those communities are still seeing a really high growth projection. So in Canada, it's really a combination of immigrations and First Nations communities that are kind of driving that growth in terms of the population rates.
Okay. Okay. Um, so COVID threw it off. I live in California. We lost a lot of people. They left this state. Did you get them?
We got some. We got some. I'm not sure directly from California. Our temperature doesn't tend to agree with Californians. But I think we got some folks from the Midwest and the Eastern Seaboard. But I don't think we had very many Californians, I have to say.
All right, I'll ask around. That's good. Well, I'm glad you're seeing the immigration. I mean, it's a great marker, right? We all look to that. If people are coming to our cities, states, province, countries, it's a great marker, a pivotal moment in history for all countries, right? If you're attracting those people, why do they want to be there? Often it's economic opportunity, it's family opportunity, right? Career growth, stable living, those kinds of things. Just I'd have to look up my old, some sociology book or something, but that's why people move around, right? For opportunity and quality of life. So congrats. That's really good news. Really good news, especially since, I'm here in California. We're losing folks. Trying to get them back. That's good. Okay. And so the people are demanding it. The other one I always like to ask when we get around the conversation of energy demand increases is, how about data centers? Are the robots also demanding that to be fed?
Yes, they absolutely are. I think that must be a universal contributor right now worldwide. We're definitely seeing a lot of interest in data centers and building that type of infrastructure in Canada. We're actually seeing some of the first provincial regulations over this summer in terms of what the requirements will be for those data centers in terms of plugging into the grid. Alberta is adopting a bring your own generation model. Um, and Ontario is just starting to formulate what that's going to look like. That was actually just released earlier this week. But we're definitely seeing those as drivers. And I think those are often lumped in with industry in terms of what we're anticipating for projected growth. But it's definitely its own unique category and its own unique beast in terms of the way that they consume and draw power from the electricity grids, the spaces that they take in communities. And we're definitely seeing a lot of conversation around, at least within our membership and ecosystem, the real unique role that storage can play in supporting data centers in terms of the electricity that they use. Um, Energy storage, short and long duration, can play a really key part in how those um, how those assets are drawing electricity from the grid, when they get it, how much it costs, how much they're taking from the broader grid, all of that sort of thing. And I know a lot of our provinces are looking to have the data centers put back into the grid as well. Instead of just taking off energy from the grid, they're looking to ensure that the data centers are also, in the same way that industry is at certain times able to contribute and support the reliability and the stability of the grids as they're developed as well.
You know a ton about the policy. That is fantastic. It's supporting in such detail. And thank you for being so well read about it. The bring your own generation model, does storage qualify?
So that's still TBD. We're
Mm.
actually putting together some submissions on that. It's definitely our opinion that storage should qualify, especially when you pair it with assets like solar and wind, where you're probably going to have excess at times. And why not just siphon that off and have it usable for the data center later on? But I think that one is still TBD.
Okay. Well, I hope for you guys it does. It seems to make sense to me. It seems to
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah. Um, what about the grid? Anything you can share with us about Canada? Updates needed? You talking about all this extra demand? Generation's got to come in. What do you know about that, and how does storage play a role in it?
So a lot of Canada's grids are looking, as we said, at integrating new types of assets. They're looking at increased demand growth, and they're looking at refurbishing of existing assets. Canada actually has an incredibly diverse mix of energy generation in its electricity ecosystem. We've got nuclear, we've got hydro, we've kind of got it all, honestly, from coast to coast, even coal and natural gas, although those ones we're seeing less and less. Um, so, our grid is very strong in the terms that we have lots of resources. I think because we've always had lots of resources, though, there's maybe not necessarily been the impetus to optimize some of those resources and optimize some of those connection points, how energy gets from point A to point B, interconnections between provincial grids and how they might be able to support and buffer each other up. So it's really interesting to see in Canada that the provinces and even the federal government are looking at energy development, energy generation, our electricity systems at a much more holistic level than they previously had. It's very much historically been, each province has lots of energy resources, so they just generate what they need. And if they have extra, they're able to export it. But now we're seeing provinces who are approaching, whether because of refurbishment, whether because of increased demand projection, or changes in the types of generation assets they have on their system. We're seeing provinces approach a bit of a crunch point. And so they're really looking for ways to optimize their systems. And energy storage is a great optimizer for electricity systems. So we're obviously involved in a lot of those conversations. We actually published a paper earlier this week that was looking at the role that some of the more distributed energy storage resources could play in. This one was about specifically the province of Ontario in terms of how can you better leverage and optimize the assets you've already got in your ecosystem at a distributed level to help while you've got the refurbishment, while you've got the projected demand, and while you're really still working on developing some of those new generation assets.
My goodness. Okay. I'm not even sure how to respond. You have some capacity on the grid. You hit me up with so much information. You have some capacity on the grid. You understand the demand coming forward, and you're working through the strategies in order to match that. I think over time versus the power demand, and I don't think I've heard it spoken so eloquently before on how that all happens and the forward thought and strategy that's needed by, quite frankly, so many different humans, organizations, companies, for profit, nonprofit, government, all have to get aligned to make a strategy like that occur. And it's really wonderful to hear you speak about it in terms of these are the plans we're considering. These are some of the options. And, I'll just go ahead and circle back to, these are our 10 and 20-year power projections, right, to get it aligned. Well done. Very impressive, Leone, from you and ESC. That's very good. Um, you're throwing me at a loss here. Well, let me just switch gears for a second and tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you find yourself here at ESC?
So I started with ESC about 5 years ago. I was the second employee, which is really fun looking back now. We're in the process of hiring employees 7 and 8. So to go from 2 to 8 in the span of 5 years is a lot of growth. And it's been a lot of wearing a lot of different hats. In terms of what brought me to Energy Storage Canada is I've done a lot of work in community and social services focused, not for profit, since I finished my post secondary education. And in Ontario, it is often intersecting with energy. So when I was looking for a new job about 8 years ago, somebody suggested that I try a different energy association called the Energy Council of Canada. And they are focused on telling Canada's energy storage outward, basically. So they deal with all of the different types of energy generation that Canada has, and they focus on telling Canada's energy storage to all of the different markets in the world, and kind of popularizing that story. So it was a phenomenal starting place in terms of learning Canada's energy ecosystem, making a bit of that transition shift to from the more community and social services focused side of things to the energy and policy side of things. There wasn't a better job that I could have gotten in terms of getting a primer, um, for the energy landscape. And when that role ended, I decided that I did want to stay in energy, and energy storage was one of the markets, one of the sectors that everybody was really jazzed about, really excited to see what would happen, really excited to see where Canada would play in the global market in that system. At that point, there weren't any projects or procurements in Canada, so it was still all very speculative and future forward. But it seemed like a really interesting place to kind of plug in terms of having established a bit of an understanding of what Canada's energy ecosystem looks like broadly, trying to plug into a particular sector within that ecosystem and one that is just getting up and running versus some of the very established energy sectors like oil and gas, like hydropower that have been in Canada for decades. It was really exciting to make that shift to kind of the new kid on the block, I guess, an up and coming industry, and plug in there. And it's been just a wild ride from the start.
What a great start, great story. I get the transition too. You're leaning into all of your passions, I think, is what I hear.
Yeah, definitely. My education is in liberal arts, and it really focuses on forcing you to see the way that everything is interconnected and where you can always find intersectionalities, whether you're doing philosophy or poli sci or history. And so the transition from, community and social services side of not-for-profit advocacy to communities and engagement in the energy sector really wasn't that difficult because it's still the same communities across Canada, and it's still a lot of the same questions. You're just talking about different things when, folks have concerns and when folks are really passionate about things. In the energy sector, they're really passionate about where projects are located and how it's going to impact their community. When you're doing, community and social services, people are worried about how they can access the services and what services are available. But it's really the same people, and they're really just looking for the same thing, which is the best outcome for their community. So it was a bit of a tangent, I think, probably from a career coaching perspective, it wouldn't have been recommended. But it's worked really well for me, and I really like working in the energy space.
I don't know. I mean, you transition into energy from supporting and serving people, and I really love how you tied that together. I don't know that I've quite heard that before. A lot of the transition statements that I've heard, whether it's energy independence or renewable and clean, it's more about environment typically. And you're focused on, supporting and serving the people of the community. through this transition, and targeting and passionate about storage to be a key player in making that happen. I think that is very unique. I don't know that I've heard that before, Leone. I'm impressed. Yeah, I haven't heard that before. Maybe you guys, Canada's got something going on. That's pretty good. ESC's got it going on. But do you agree? I mean, most of the messaging is around environment. Yeah.
A lot of it is around environment. A lot of what we talk about with energy storage, though, is the cost side of energy storage and of renewable assets. I think that's maybe a bit of a natural product of the fact that it is a new technology and initially it was quite expensive. So I think people have a lot of concerns about how it's going to impact their bill, what they're going to end up paying if energy storage ends up in their ecosystem. Does this lower my energy bill? Does it, hike it up really high? A lot of the concerns that we also hear about, data centers coming in and really increasing rates at an astronomical level. Folks are also worried about that in terms of, new types of generation and new technologies coming in. They only see the really high front end capex cost for storage, for solar, for wind. They don't necessarily have the context to see how that plays out over the 20-year life cycle of that asset. So a lot of our conversations are about really fostering competitive procurements and competitive opportunities for storage because we appreciate that energy bills are a big deal in an economy where we're seeing a lot of inflation. It can, in some provinces in Canada, be your largest bill of the month. So we do a lot of talking instead of saying that like you need this storage asset, you 100% need to build storage. We do a lot of advocating for competitive procurements. Let us bring storage to your procurement. Let us compete with the other assets. And we think that in a lot of cases, we can compete and maybe even give you better value. And that will, in the long run, help keep your bills lower rather than raise them. So it's a key point of the conversation in Canada. I'm not sure. I'm not as familiar with the U.S. system. I don't know if that's a key component of the storage conversation there, but it definitely has been in Canada in terms of, is this going to be a really, useless asset that's just going to drive my bill up? Is this just a fad? Does it actually do what you say it will? And will it actually, reduce my bill? They want to see the numbers. They want to see what the benefit for them is going to be to have these assets added to their ecosystem.
Yes. And yes, it's the same conversation because we're calculating megawatts over time, right? And you can increase your capacity factor when you add storage to your generation plant, whatever type it is. Quite frankly, right? Any type of
Exactly.
electricity generation. Yeah. The other ones that come up into play are grid stabilization, for example, right? We have some fluctuations there. Price is always the conversation. You started there because that's what affects the people, right?
Yeah,
Living in our communities, and for the most part, people want the cheapest price for electricity. After that,
absolutely.
they may not know what's going on or have the time to care about it because they have other things to worry
Absolutely.
about, right? So the price is what's most important, and then that's where the votes fall typically.
The case and making sure that the light comes on when I flip the switch, please.
That's right. That's right. And someday the Canadian EV charger cars are running around more and more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that will be a bigger part of the conversation in the next 3 to 5 years, especially with more provinces looking at leveraging distributed energy resources like EVs. On the V2G side, I think that's going to become a much bigger part of the conversation in the next 5 years for Canada than it has been in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yes, any new generation, I think, has to be considering adding storage to whatever its development plan is. It seems like a no-brainer in most cases, the way that it calculates out. If you can, if you can store an extra 10 megawatts and then push 10 megawatts, it's you're cycling 20, and
Mhm.
the math starts to work out pretty good. Are you getting any pushback on that? Because that one seems like easier putt.
Yeah, we do see some pushback in communities. So, one unique aspect of the storage conversation in Canada is that in the province of Ontario, developers have to have a municipal support resolution to build a storage project. So, they have to have the approval of the municipality in order to build the asset in that community. And I think rightfully, as a new technology, communities and municipalities are concerned about major electricity energy infrastructure of any type coming into their community. And one of the biggest items, or I would say two maybe biggest items in terms of pushback that we're seeing for storage is one, the safety in terms of fire, and two is the environmental impact. So if there's a fire or if this asset sits here for 20 years, is it going to ruin the water table? Is it going to pollute farmland? Ontario is a big farming province. There's lots of farmland across Canada. So I think we are seeing pushback. I think there are a lot of communities who are very interested in having those type of assets and having storage development in their communities. And then there are others where I think their priorities are just on different things at this point. And, I think it'll be interesting to see how it kind of shakes out in terms of where the projects end up getting developed and where they're waiting until later. And, maybe we'll see other projects develop there later on.
Mm-hmm. Uh, how? Give me the idea of some of the size of these projects you're talking about. When you say community, as I'm trying to calibrate the size in my mind.
So, in terms of some of the projects that we're seeing in Ontario, it can be anywhere from 50 to 200 megawatts. Some of the other provinces, we're seeing more like 50, 10, 40 megawatts, that size of things. I think there's a few that are kind of in between the 50 and 100 megawatts in Alberta as well. So they're certainly not on the scale of like mega installations like you're seeing in China and some of those regions. Um, but I think for communities that are focused on land as a means of generating their income, they're very farm focused. They're very focused on ensuring that that remains a reliable means of income. It isn't so much about the scale as it is about what you're putting in a place. You're putting electricity and energy generation in a place that in their minds is really reserved for farming. And Ontario does have a lot of regulations in place, and most provinces in Canada do in terms of protecting farmland. So we're certainly not seeing folks looking to site energy storage projects on prime agriculture lands in the middle of someone's farm fields. But I think folks are just still unfamiliar enough with the technology and uncomfortable enough with, what they see in the media. That, of course, is always chasing the biggest, wildest stories about fires and, thermal runaway and all of the, horror stories that are attached to it. I think they're just cautious about what that could mean for their community and the land in their community and the home and the people in their communities.
Mm-hmm. It, I mean, so down here south of you, we try and target the area that's not very populated to start with, right?
Mhm.
Close enough to put an interconnect into the grid, of course, as
Mhm.
well. Yeah, it's the same strategy, right?
Yes, I think maybe just as a product of slightly smaller ecosystems, we still have quite a lot of people who are very active in our smaller communities in terms of what does or doesn't go in there. We're certainly not seeing people bidding to put storage projects in the middle of downtown Toronto, or anything like that. But I think just based on where the electricity is needed and where those interconnections are. It does put them in some of the smaller rural communities in Ontario and other provinces where folks still want to make sure that their lands and their livelihood are protected. And there's maybe still a little bit of, rural versus city rivalry in terms of they maybe don't really want to put in an asset if it's just going to help people in Toronto, but not serve their community, which is fair. And so we tend to engage in those contexts and have conversations with them about the potential benefits that it can have in their community. We don't, as an organization, ever advocate for specific projects. But what we can do is have conversations where people are really wanting answers about, what is this actually going to do for my community? What are the actual potential benefits? What should I be looking for when a developer brings me a project in terms of making sure this is safe for my community? So we're able to come in and share some of those insights and information, sometimes even bring in third party experts, like from some of our member companies that deal very specifically with, either insurance or fire safety or whatever the main concern in the community is, and really bring folks in and bring them together and try and have the conversation. Our primary goal in those contexts isn't to advocate for a project to get built, but make sure that the community has the best information currently available to them to make a decision about what is or isn't right for their community.
I love that transparency focus right there. Sharing the information with everyone involved and then let the people come to the conclusion that they think is best for themselves. So, what are some of those benefits to the community? And maybe the other question is, how are you winning the hearts and minds of those people?
I think we're doing pretty well. There's lots of projects getting built, so we're not totally out of the game. In terms of some of the benefits to the communities, we spend a lot of time talking. Obviously, Canada is fairly well known for its rather volatile winters and unpredictable weather patterns. We spend a lot of time talking to folks about how energy storage can support kind of those key infrastructures like hospitals and fire stations, police stations, that sort of thing, in terms of just providing redundancy if they are in rural communities where often those outages are going to happen if you've got a snowstorm or an ice storm. Having an energy storage asset in your community means that you will have access to reliable energy for a fairly extended period of time to provide backup for your hospitals, your grocery stores, those essential services. In terms of what the asset actually does for community, that's probably the most practical one. But obviously, we always encourage communities as well to engage with the developers who are coming into these communities. If you want to look at negotiating a community benefit agreement to make sure that developers who are coming in and building these projects are also investing in your community, that this isn't necessarily just a dollars and cents interaction or exchange, and you want to work and engage with a developer to develop a community benefit agreement, like absolutely go for it and work with that developer to find a match that works for you. And that can bring very targeted benefits to your community if you have a developer that's willing to have that conversation and offer those kind of benefits. And we're certainly seeing that that is the case in different communities across the country where, the developers are really investing in those communities, particularly in First Nations communities where they are getting equity partnerships for a lot of these assets. We're seeing really, really large investments in our First Nations communities through a lot of these projects, in addition to the municipal communities. So there's a lot of layers, I think, for the developers in Canada in terms of getting these projects and communicating those benefits, because you're talking to the municipality, but you're also talking to the First Nations community that is in that territory and in that space, and working with them as well to ensure that they're also seeing the benefits of those projects. And so I think it's really exceptional to see so many projects in Canada that are able to successfully negotiate all of these different levels of ensuring that, the developer gets its asset built and that's successful, the electricity system operator and the utility are getting the reliability and the asset that they need. The municipal community is getting the benefits, and the First Nations communities are getting equity partnership agreements and benefits in their communities as well. So it's a lot of work. And it's always really exciting and really impressive when you're able to see them come to fruition and see all of those different pieces align to get some of these projects developed and energized. I think maybe when you're not in the energy ecosystem, we maybe take for granted how much is going on behind the scenes to get a project built. And also all of those touch points that are happening along the way to make sure that the people that need to be involved, informed, have an opinion are able to do that advocacy as part of the process.
What's Up Renewables is growing, and we're looking for new sponsors to join us. Our show connects leaders, innovators, and field professionals across the renewable industry, and our sponsors are part of that conversation. Some have seen their network expand instantly. Others have grown revenue and brand visibility through the connections they've made right here. If you want your company to reach the people driving the future of clean energy, now's the time to get involved. Contact us at media@whatsuprenewables.com to become a sponsor today. Leone, you are so good at this. You leave very little room for me to ask a question. So,
Sorry about that.
nope, fantastic. But and you're so much smarter about this. So I'm going to try and just make sure I understood it correctly. But there's definitely the financial, economic benefit to communities of all varying types. So we can improve, I don't know, something there. Could be school, could be community parks and things like that. And then we have, you started off with the first one with the weather, which I thought was that one was sort of near and dear to me because it falls inside of, what I would just call energy reliability, which is something that I'm always kind of very passionate about. And you mentioned the top ones, right? Your hospitals, schools, grocery stores, all of the things that people need in their communities and keeping them powered up. Now that's a different kind of project, right? You can't be pumping that from one community to a big city. It needs to be available for that group there. But it speaks to, I think, where I sit most of the time in creating reliability, stability, dependability, with energy for the people of the planet. It's kind of how I look at it, and how the important space, or I don't know, the piece that energy storage plays in that role, because it's fast. It's maybe the one thing, I've done some research on it. I'm not the scientist engineer. What I've seen is it's very safe. We've worked on a lot of them. We understand that it's safe. We understand that there's protocols, and when followed, things work out very well. But boy, it's fast, and you can deliver that reliability so quickly. It's sometimes just mind-boggling, right? I've spent all of my career, nearly all of my career, in wind energy, and always amazed about how quickly we could put up power plants and provide electricity from wind. And then solar seems even quicker. And now we have storage that's like, just feels like overnight sometimes. It happens so quickly. But that brings, real independence often, and a sense of security for folks. And, here in California, I lived through a lot of, I guess they call them brownouts, which just means everybody's running their air conditioner in the summer, I think. And then, even these public safety power shutoffs that seem fewer and fewer, but because of the risk of fire, when conditions are right, we just shut off everybody's power. And then everybody turns on a small generator, which, I kind of look at that and go, well, now we have an exponential number of risks for fire because this
Mhm,
is
mhm.
everybody's running their own generator.
Yeah.
So solving that for people, I think, ultimately increases safety. Is sort of, I don't know if you followed me full circle there, because there's still the risk when you put it on top of the family, right, or the business to provide their own electricity. Energy storage is quick and it provides that reliability.
Yeah, and I mean that goes back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of the EV side of things and also the home energy storage systems. There was a really cool pilot run in the province of Nova Scotia where they specifically targeted seniors who had health needs in their province and supplied them with energy storage resources in their homes so that when they do have electricity outages, those people are still safe. They have reliable energy. They don't have to worry and stress about, their medications that need to be a certain temperature or, a device that they use to, keep themselves well and healthy in their homes or I mean some folks have lifts in their home to be able to access certain parts of their home. They don't have to worry about that going offline. So I think that on the grid scale we see that as really important at the community level where you can use those storage assets at the utility scale to provide reliability for rural or remote communities, ensure that you're able to provide that backup energy resource to those essential services. But I think increasingly we're also seeing it on an individual level, like you said, where somebody has an EV, where somebody has a home storage system, and they're able to know that they have access to that. They know that they've got that reliable, stable resource that will help them regardless of what the broader context for the energy system and the electricity system or the weather system might be presenting them. They've got that extra bit of reliability and security for their energy and their home and their families.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the popular ones with elderly and folks that have medical conditions that need electricity for their, quality of life in most cases. And then around here we get some government help. If you're in that situation, we can buy you a battery, right, for the house. But I've seen these programs. The batteries are small. You might get 8 hours, right? And I'm going, I don't think that's enough. Even on a work day when, there's planned outage because, section of your neighborhood needs to be upgraded or something, it's more than 8 hours. It doesn't seem to be enough. And then I had not thought about young families until very recently. I'm a grandfather now, a 5-month-old little boy. I love bragging about that one. But we had a power outage, and all of a sudden, frozen breast milk was an issue. And I'm going, well,
Yeah,
I hadn't. So even young families, have the
yeah,
need for, and that's a bit of security for the young families to know that they have that and it's taken care of. And so it's not just elderly or folks with medical conditions. It's young families too. For a lot of
yeah,
reasons, our society is dependent on it, and we're responsible to provide a reliable source.
yeah. That's one of the places where we're seeing a lot of interesting things happening with long duration energy storage technologies. We have quite a few LDES members, and I've discovered in some of my travels in the last couple of years that Canada seems to have like a larger percentage than average of long duration energy storage technology providers, which is kind of exciting. But I think that in the next several years, we'll start to see those assets come into play in terms of providing that security and stability and reliability outside that 8 hour window. We tend to define LDAs as 10 to 12 hours plus. So we're looking at resources that could potentially provide full day or multi day reliability depending on the type of asset. I don't think we're quite at the point where you might be able to see those in a home. But certainly in a community, I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of those assets, whether it's alternate battery chemistries or where, there are geographies and geologies that support it, some of the compressed air systems or, some of the thermal storage. There's a lot of options there and a lot of technologies that are getting up and running that are going to be really exciting additions that will probably in a lot of ways change the whole conversation about energy storage all over again, just as we get it settled and get that baseline set. We're going to add these new assets and these longer durations, and it will just open a world of a whole bunch of new different possibilities for communities and electricity grids as well. So that's something that we're really excited about as well. And I think kind of plugs into what you were saying in terms of that security. 8 hours sounds long theoretically until you have to try and keep a baby cool that is too young to thermoregulate on their own during a 40-degree heat spike in California or Southern Ontario, wherever you might be. Same with keeping folks warm, whether it's elderly or babies. There's just a lot of those factors that we rely on in our modern life for electricity and energy to be there. And storage is able to play a really unique role in making sure that as much as possible when the turbine stops spinning or a line goes down that you've still got access to some of that electricity and energy that is going to enable you to be safe and healthy and secure and you're able to rely on it over the long term.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Hot babies. That's a scary one. I hadn't even thought about
But
that.
yeah, no,
That's a
it's
scary.
terrifying.
That's a scary one. And, the other thing is, yes, technology is moving so quickly in this space that probably longer duration is likely around the corner. In the meantime, you can put in more capacity and buy more time, right? There are solutions today that people can consider. I wanted to circle back on some of your comments about safety, right? Is this safe nearby us? Things like that. I'm not a design engineer, but boy, I've worked alongside some of the most brilliant ones. Some of them are my friends, and I've never seen a challenge that they couldn't solve, right?
Mhm.
And some of the older seasoned ones, they'll say all of these safety issues can be fixed. There's none
Mhm.
that cannot be mitigated in some way. There's always an answer. Sometimes it may be costly, but the answer is there. The other one is controls, right,
Mhm.
around access and placement and protocol.
Mhm.
Not so different than protocol and management of an automobile. You're carrying around hazardous material, and we're all driving them, and we learn how to manage it safely. So there
Mhm.
are ways to mitigate all of these safety things. I hope we're communicating that transparently as well, because the risk is there, but the risk is in our homes too, right? With the outlets in our homes, that you can die touching the electricity in your home, right? But there's a way to manage it and mitigate that risk and keep people safe. It's the same thing with power generation and energy storage. Just wanted to toss that out there. There's always an answer.
Always an answer. And the biggest factor that we're finding is making sure that you communicate. We do have all these staggeringly brilliant engineers in our industry, and I am also absolutely not an engineer, and have no hope to be, I don't think. But we do have some staggeringly brilliant people who are working on these problems and solving these risks and doing their best to mitigate these risks. They're also building these assets in their communities and near their homes and loved ones, and they're putting all of that energy and um, that know-how and problem solving into making sure that those are safe assets in their communities as well. But also bringing, your local firefighters into the conversation, ensuring that they feel comfortable and confident. Your first responders, like there are a lot of pieces that go into safety that are communications and engagement as well, from ensuring that all of your first responders, your firefighters have the plan for the asset, that it's developed in tandem with them, that they feel comfortable and confident about it, that the developers have put all of these pieces in place long before the asset is ever energized, sometimes often even before the the asset is even in place. These plans are built and rebuilt and refined all the way through the process to ensure safety to the highest extent possible. But like you said, also that's the same case with any energy generation asset. We have nuclear power in Canada, which often makes folks nervous. But we're also seeing similar conversations just about natural gas in some Canadian jurisdictions in terms of what are the fire risks for natural gas generators. Are we willing as a community to take those risks on? What has the developer done to mitigate those risks and ensure that as much as possible, that's not going to happen here? So it really is just an essential part of the process. In addition to all the engineering that goes into it, is all the engagement and conversations and education along the way where you're citing those assets so that everybody's feeling comfortable and confident long before the asset ever goes into operation.
Mm-hmm. Spot on. Echo back where you started. It's about communication, and a lot of times we have to force that communication to happen to make unknowns known and be transparent, so that the right people can get alongside, and perhaps it's a design upgrade or improvement or modification, and then very often it is process protocol. Talk to folks that know how to work around them and have them develop the right procedures and protocols. And yes, bring in your local first responders. Let them get a plan and location and access, and teach them how to move around them safely. I mean, yeah, that one always surprises me on how it doesn't happen in some communities. Yes, your fire department, but this is new information, right? We have to share it and communicate it. I love the approach, Leon.
Certainly. And the biggest thing we always tell people is, particularly developers and folks when they're going into these communities, is don't not talk about the worst case scenario. Don't avoid mentioning that there are risks, because the people that you're talking with have access to the internet. They already know all the risks and all of the imagined risks that go with these assets. So be respectful enough of their intelligence and their own engagement in the process to have that conversation about all of the risks and about the worst case scenario and how you plan to alleviate that, mitigate that. And like you said, sometimes it does mean adjusting your project specs. Sometimes it means slightly changing your site location. There's any number of solutions to all of these concerns, but don't go in hoping that you won't have to talk about the bad part or the unpleasant part, or being unwilling to have those conversations, or you're not going to have a very good outcome for your project if you're just not even willing to engage with the possibility of those things happening at some point. It's just not going to be very successful for you. Transparency is absolutely the best way to go.
And the word of encouragement to those folks talking about their project is to know that there is always an answer. Don't
Absolutely.
don't be
Absolutely.
scared. There's
And if you
always an
don't know the
answer.
answer, find somebody who does. There's always
Yes.
somebody who's got the answer, even if it's not you. I, as a non-engineer in a very technical field, am very well used to saying, I have no idea. Let me go find somebody who does. But we need to be comfortable doing that in community context as well, and any form of engagement where, like you said, there is an answer out there. I just don't happen to have it. Let me go find it for you.
That's right. That's right. And you commented about the internets. Is that something about people speaking negatively about them online?
So
Those folks need more information as well. It's hard to get it to them though. Often those
yes,
are the folks that want to push their information out, accurate or not, but they're not interested in receiving a whole lot. They like pushing it.
yeah, yeah. In terms of the information, it is very much um, specific to the media cycle where things that do happen get blown so far out of proportion before you can even get in there with accurate information if you have it. One of the events that still tends to come up for us is the Moss Landing fire. And that got so big so fast in the media cycle before anybody really had the chance to get out the facts. And so we spend a lot of time going through the facts that are relevant to that case because all of the spiraling and the fear and the anxiety stays on the internet and stays really high in those SEO results. But the stats that came out and the findings and the research that weren't nearly as scary don't make it to the top of the list. So that was really what I meant in terms of, they have access to the internet. They are going to see all the scariest, worst case, most blown out of proportion scenarios online. And that is what's in their mind when they come to have this conversation with you. So a lot of what we do and a lot of, the job in terms of engaging with communities is helping them to find more reliable resources that maybe have that more boring, less spectacular information that can help provide, reassurances. Maybe it won't be enough for them to say yes to a project, but then they're at least making that decision based on the real data that comes out of incidents like that, because there's always data. There's always, folks going back over to evaluate what could or should have been done, what we're going to do differently going forward. So helping folks kind of sift through all of the fear mongering and the spiraling and the spectacular videos that are always top in your search results, and help them, dig into some of the more boring, fairly enough, data and results, so that they have the reliable information about the incidents and about the potential and danger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how to push that out there. Sometimes I think on the internet is not the answer. I think often
Yes.
in the communities, put your booth up at every little event and share a little
Yeah.
information. It's a funny thing. It's sort of like one person at a time. It's a grind,
Yeah.
but it's
Very
well
much
worth it.
so. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you're right that the internet is perhaps not the place for those conversations. It's a lot harder to be heard in the internet, in the rapid media cycles and communication cycles that we live in day to day. And it's also a lot easier to yell at somebody on the internet. Whereas it's a lot harder to yell at me when I'm standing in a booth trying to be very nice and talk with you. And also vice versa. It's a lot harder for me to yell at you if we're standing in person. It goes both ways. But yeah, I don't think that the internet is maybe the best venue or the best option for pushing those conversations forward. We host a lot of webinars and find that that can sometimes um, at certain times and for certain conversations be very effective in terms of giving folks a venue where they can come and ask the experts their question. And the experts are in that session with the expectation that they're going to get the hard questions and they're okay answering those questions. And definitely, like you said, putting your booth up at community events, at community association, at municipalities, going to the city councils and the town councils, like that is where you are going to best be able to be heard if you are going to be heard.
Yep. It's a great way to do it. I guess I shouldn't knock our own little passion here with our podcast. It is What's Up
Oh, that's
Renewables.
true.
Yeah, trying to share some good messages as well. We focus on, yes, we love the technology conversations. We have a ton of safety conversations. A lot of those specialists come in here and we cover that. Often it's for the people that work in the industry. That's really kind of our focus. But, it's great information for the people living nearby as well, right? It's because
Absolutely.
if you're geographically adjacent, then it's good information to push that. And share those good messages. But you're right. Even the podcast here and the webinars, it's not a true conversation. But, if folks take a moment and digest some of it, just might learn something new.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've truly enjoyed talking with you today, Leone, getting to know you personally and more about Energy Storage Canada. Very impressive, both your career and the mission that ESC is on. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch and learning more.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation. Always appreciate the chance to talk about Energy Storage Canada and what we do. And hopefully we'll get you up to our conference next year, maybe.
It's gonna have to happen sometime. I think that's a must do. We'll put it on the docket. Yeah.
Absolutely. At least we host it in September and October before the snow starts blowing, so it won't be too much of a temperature shock for you, hopefully.
Ah, California dig. I like it. All
Yep.
right. Thanks again, Leon. It was great talking to you. Look forward to chatting again in the future.
You too. Have a great day.